السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته يا شيخنا.
أبا عبد الرحمن، كيف الحال؟
الحمد لله يا شيخنا.
طيب نبدأ الدرس.
نعم يا شيخنا.
طيب إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. To continue our book Siyar A'alām An-Nubala, reading from the tarjama of our mother al-Mu'minin Āishah radiyallahu anha. If we have the print of Mu'assasatul Risala, which is the copy that we have sent across and that appears on the screen, you will be in the second volume of that copy, page 135, volume 2, page 125. That copy itself, page 135, that copy itself occurs in 28 volumes. That is the print of Mu'assasatul Risala that we show on the screen. But if you have the copy of Shaykh Muhammad Ayman Ash-Shabrawi that occurs in 18 volumes, we'll be reading from volume 3, page 426. We started the class. In the last class, we spoke about what does it mean to say Āishah. If you say Āishah, what do you mean? And then the meaning of that expression, Mu'minin, we explained it, and how each of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam are called Mu'minin, and they are all referred to as Ummahatul Mu'minin. We said in the last class that Āishah radiyallahu anha Mu'minin bintul Imam as-Siddiq al-Akbar Khalifati Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam Abi Bakr Abdullah ibn Quhafa Uthman ibn Amir ibn Amr ibn Ka'b ibn Sa'd ibn Taym ibn Murrah ibn Ka'b ibn Lu'ay al-Qurashiyatu. We explained what does it mean if she's called al-Qurashiyya. Is an ascription to her tribe Quraysh. At-Taymiyatu, that is in reference to her tribe also Banu Taym. So she is called At-Taymiyya, and she is al-Makkiyya because she was born in Mecca. And an-Nabawiyya, that is in ascription to the prophethood of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Ummul Mu'minin, that is her title from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned in the Quran. And then Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, Zawjatul Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. She's so called because, of course, she's the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Afqahu nisa'il ummati al-itlaq. Al-Imam Adh-Dhahabi said that our mother Āishah, afqahu nisa'i al-ummati al-itlaq, the most vastly knowledgeable in the sciences of Islamic jurisprudence in terms of the women of this ummah, the entirety of the women. Afqahu nisa'il ummah, the most knowledgeable in the sciences of Islam, when you compare her to the rest of the women in this ummah, the most knowledgeable of them was Āishah. We would notice from this paragraph that her name was mentioned, Āishah, her lineage was mentioned from her father Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it got us to mention the name of her grandfather Abu Quhafa Uthman and her paternal grandmother Ruman, and other ascriptions regarding her were also mentioned. Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi went on and said, rahimahullah, wa ummuha hiya Ruman, wa ummuha hiya Ruman bintu Amir ibn Uwaymir ibn Abd al-Shams ibn Attab. Ummuha hiya Ruman bintu Amir ibn Uwaymir ibn Abd al-Shams ibn Attab ibn Udayna al-Kinana. This is the lineage of the mother of our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha. Her mother was Ruman. So Āishah radiyallahu anha, Abdullah, her father was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and her mother was Ruman. We can continue the class from here, inshallah. Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, rahimahullah, هاجر بآعشة أبواها. هاجر بآعشة أبواها وتزوجها نبي الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قبل مهاجره بعد وفاة الصديقة خديجة بنت خويلد، وذلك قبل الهجرة ببضعة أشهر شهرا، وقيل بعامين، ودخل بها في شوال سنة 2 منصرفه عليه الصلاة والسلام من غزوة بدر وهي ابنة 9. Al-Imam Adh-Dhahabi continued regarding our mother Āishah. He said, هاجر بآعشة أبواها. Āishah made hijrah. She was a little young girl, just above 6 years old at the time of hijrah. At the time of hijrah from Mecca to Medina, our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha was about 6 years old. So she went with her mother Ruman, with her father Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So Al-Imam Adh-Dhahabi said, هاجر بآعشة أبواها. The parents of Āishah took Āishah radiyallahu anha upon hijrah. They went with her. She made hijrah from Mecca to Medina with them. وتزوجها نبي الله قبل مهاجره بعد وفاة الصديقة خديجة بنت خويلد. وتزوجها نبي الله, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, تزوجها, the Prophet of Allah, Nabiyullahi, تزوجها, Nabiyullahi, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, got married to Āishah qabla muhajarihi, before the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam went on hijrah. So the marriage of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to our mother Āishah was before the hijrah, بعد وفاة الصديقة خديجة بنت خويلد, بعد وفاة الصديقة, after the demise of as-Siddiqa, the one who was true to Iman, who was very honest with Iman, our mother Khadija bintu Khuwaylid. Khadija bintu Khuwaylid radiyallahu anha, the first wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, as we mentioned in the last class. The reports that occurs in Sahih al-Bukhari and in Sahih Muslim regarding her was that she passed away qabla makhraj al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam bi 3 sinin. Khadija had died before the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam made hijrah. 3 years before he made hijrah. 3 years before hijrah, Khadija had died, meaning that she passed away 10 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commenced his message. We remember he spent 13 years in Mecca and 10 in Medina, and a little above 10. So if she passed away, radiyallahu anha, 3 years before the Hijrah, that means she passed away 10 years after the message had started, radiyallahu anha. So after Khadija passed away, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam got married to our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha. تزوجها نبي الله قبل مهاجره بعد وفاة الصديقة خديجة بنت خويلد. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam got married to Āishah radiyallahu anha 3 years shortly before he made Hijrah. The scholars also say from the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, they say that فَلَبِثَ سَنَتَيْن أَوْ قَرِيبًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ. لَبِثَ سَنَتَيْن. After Khadija passed away, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam waited for about 2 years. وَنَكَحَ عَائِشَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا. And then he married Āishah radiyallahu anha. So that's why you will see in our text, Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, وَذَلِكَ قَبْلَ الْهِجْرَةِ بِبِضْعَةِ عَشَرِ شَهْرًا. The marriage of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to Āishah was before Hijrah, like some months, بِبِضْعَةِ عَشْرٍ, like 13 or 15 months before the Hijrah. 13 months or 15 months before the Hijrah. There is a clear-cut report that Khadija passed away 3 years before Hijrah. And there is a clear-cut report that the Prophet ﷺ waited for about 2 years before he married Āishah radiyallahu anha. That means the marriage was about a year or thereabout. That's why Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, بِبِضْعَةِ عَشْرِ شَهْرًا, some months, some 10 months, like 12, like 13 or 15 months or thereabout before the Hijrah. And this is what he has affirmed. Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi affirmed that the marriage of Āishah to the Prophet ﷺ was about 13 months before the Prophet's Hijrah. Before the Prophet's Hijrah to Medina, about 13 months, he got married to Āishah radiyallahu anha. وَقِيلَ بِعَامَيْنِ. He said, well, some of the people have said that it was 2 years before the Hijrah. But what appears most authentic, and Allah knows best, is that it's about 13 to 14 or 15 months before Hijrah. Why? Because Urwa ibn Zubayr reports that hadith, and it is authentically collected in Sahih al-Bukhari and in Sahih Muslim, that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam labitha sanatayn aw qariban min dhalik. He waited for about 2 years. So if Khadija died 3 years before Hijrah, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam waited for about 2 years, alayhi salatu wasalam, then what that would imply was that the marriage took place about 13 months before Hijrah. The marriage to Āishah took place about 13 months before Hijrah. So that was why he said, وَذَلِكَ قَبْلَ الْهِجْرَةِ بِبِضْعَةِ عَشْرِ شَهْرًا. The marriage was about 13 months before Hijrah. وَكِيلَ بِعَامَيْنِ. Some people say 2 years before Hijrah. I hope that point is clear. In the last class, there was a question about the Prophet's marriage to Sauda radiyallahu anha bintu Zam'a before our mother. Āishah radiyallahu anha. And I recall that I explained that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam married Āishah first before he married Sauda. The Prophet, after Khadija's death, radiyallahu anhum, the Prophet married Khadija. The Prophet married Āishah after the death of Khadija. He waited for 2 years and then he married Āishah. And then subsequently, just around that time, he married Sauda and took Sauda to himself. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So the first woman who came to live inside the house of the Prophet after Khadija's death was who? Sauda. But the first wife upon whom he had an act, he got married to in an act, was who? Āishah radiyallahu anha. And this is affirmed in a report collected by Al-Imam Ahmad and Al-Imam At-Tabarani, and one of the scholars, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Adam al-Ethiopi, he mentioned that this isnad is Hasan. Āishah radiyallahu anha said, لما توفيت خديجة قالت خولة بنت حكيم امرأة عثمان ابن مزعون يا رسول الله ألا تزوج. Āishah said radiyallahu anha in this hadith, it occurs in the Musnad of Al-Imam Ahmad, and Al-Imam At-Tabarani collected it, that لما توفيت خديجة قالت خولة بنت حكيم. When Khadija passed away, Khawla bintu Hakim, the wife of Uthman ibn Maz'un, and this woman was one of the khalat of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This woman, Khawla bintu Hakim, was a maternal aunt to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. She is from the sisters of the Prophet's mother, radiyallahu anha. I hope that it is clear. Khawla bintu Hakim, after the death of Khadija, she came and said to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Ya Rasulallah, ala tazawwaj, O Messenger of Allah, would you not get married? Qala na'am, fama indak. What do you have? I will marry. So what do you have? Qalat bikrun wa sayyibun. Khawla told the Prophet, I have a young virgin girl, wa sayyib, and I have a woman who had been previously married. Al-Bikru bintu ahabbi khalqillahi ilayk, Āishatu. As for the young virgin girl, she is the daughter of the most beloved creature to you, Āishah, who was Sayyibu Sawdatu bintu Zam'a. And as for the woman who had been previously married, that was Sauda bintu Zam'a. Qal, the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, fadhhabi, proceed now. Fadhkuri hima alayya, go and mention me to the two of them. Mention the two of them. Tell me to the two of them. فدخلت على أبي بكر. Khawla bintu Hakim, the maternal aunt of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then went to meet Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. فقال, Abu Bakr said, radiyallahu anhu, إنما هي بنت أخيه. Āishah is just the daughter of his brother. Abu Bakr was referring to the Prophet's proposal that this is Āishah. Āishah she's the daughter of his brother, referring to his closeness to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and his brotherhood with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet said alayhi salatu wasalam, Kuli lahu. The Prophet sent back Khawla bintu Hakim to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and said, Kuli lahu, say to Abu Bakr, Anta akhi fil Islam, you are my brother in this deen, al-Islam. Wabnatuka tasluhu li. As for your daughter, she is appropriate for me to marry. The closeness of the Prophet ﷺ with Abu Bakr should not prevent marriage in between the two of them, since that is not from the closeness of lineage that can bring about prohibition. So the Prophet said to Abu Bakr through Khawla, وَابْنَتُكَ تَصْلُحُ لِي, and your daughter is appropriate for me to marry. فَجَاءَهُ, the Prophet came to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, فَأَنْكَحَهُ, and Abu Bakr married Āishah to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So this is evidence that yes, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had Āishah and Sauda mentioned to him by who? Khawla bint Hakim. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was first mentioned to Abu Bakr regarding Āishah. So the marriage between Abu Bakr and Siddiq to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam regarding his daughter, the marriage of Abu Bakr of his daughter Āishah to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam took place before the marriage of Sauda. ثم دخلت على Sauda. ثم, after the Prophet had married Āishah radiyallahu anha, دخلت على Sauda. Khawla bint Hakim, the maternal aunt of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then went to Sauda. فقالت لها, and then she said to Sauda bint Zam'a, أخبري لا. Sauda bint Zam'a said to Khawla, after Khawla mentioned the proposal to her, that أخبري أبي, go and inform my father. Sauda radiyallahu anha accepted and requested Khawla bint Hakim to mention that Prophet's proposal to her father. فَذَكَرَتْ لَهُ, so Khawla mentioned it to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَزَوَّجَهُ, so her father married her to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is evidence that Khawla bint Hakim mentioned both Āishah and Sauda to the Prophet after the death of Khadija. And Urwa ibn Zubayr told us that that happened 2 years after Khadija had died. The Prophet waited for 2 years. Then Khawla came and asked the Prophet, will you not marry? Will you not marry? The Prophet said, okay, I'm ready to marry. What do you have? And then Khawla presented Āishah a virgin, a bikr, and presented a thayyib. Who was that? Sauda. So the proposal was given to Abu Bakr, and after the discussion, Abu Bakr married Āishah radiyallahu anha to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Thumma dakhalat ala Sauda. That was after when Khawla now went to propose to Sauda for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The proposal was accepted, and Sauda's father, bint Zam'a, her father married her to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is evidence that the Prophet married Āishah before Sauda, even though Sauda got into the house of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam before Āishah. So Imām Adh-Dhahabi, we come back to our book. He said, وَدَخَلَ بِهَا فِي شَوَّالِ سَنَةِ اثْنَتَيْنِ. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam took Āishah radiyallahu anha to himself. He consummated the marriage fi Shawwali sanati snatain, in the month of Shawwal, in the 2nd year of Hijrah. At that time, our mother radiyallahu anha, she had been 9 years old. So Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, Munsarafahu, that was when the Prophet had returned alayhi salatu wasalam. At the time that he returned alayhi salatu wasalam, min Ghazwati Badrin, when he returned from the battle of Badr. Wahiya ibnatu tis'in. At that time, Āishah radiyallahu anha was 9 years old. She was 9 years old when the marriage was consummated. That was in the month of Shawwal. But when the Aqdu was done, she was about 6 years old. The reports say that she was 6 years old in the month of Shawwal. So she will be about 6 years and 10 months old. She will be about 6 years and 10 months old. That's why in some reports, you will see it. They will say she was 7 years old when the Aqd, the marriage knot, was tied. Now, up to this stage, I think it is necessary for us to mention some points of benefit about what we have read so far about our mother Āishah. The first of them is that she is from Ummahatul Mu'minin, and that when our scholars write the biographies of those who came, our pious predecessors, they usually start with their names and their lineage. When they write about our scholars, they start with their names and their lineage. You would see Adh-Dhahabi started with Aisha's name and then her father's name, her father's name, her great-grandfather's name, her great-grandfather's name, and so on and so forth. And then he came and mentioned her mother, Aisha's mother, Ruman, and then the name of Ruman's father, Amir, the name of his own father, Uwaymir, the name of his own father, Abdul Shams. So this is evidence that when our scholars write about the pious predecessors, they start with their lineage, and it shows the importance of lineage in Islam. Who are you? Who gave birth to you? Your father, your great-grandfather, and all of these. Because we are all product of the kinds of lineages that we have. Our lineages have contributed a great deal to our genetic build-up and to even the kind of life that we live and how we handle affairs. After that, the initial matters in the life of Āishah was mentioned. That was her marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By age 9, she was inside the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By age 6, by about 7 years old, she was married. This is evidence that at that time she was already a mature girl at 9 to go to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Imām Ash-Shāfi'ī rahimahullah, Al-Imām Al-Bayhaqī reported from him that he said when he lived in Sana'a, he saw some girls at age 9, they were already fully menstruating. By age 10, they had had their first children. Al-Imām Ash-Shāfi'ī was reported by Al-Bayhaqī to say that he stayed in Sana'a in Yemen. Shafi'i stayed in Sana'a in Yemen. He saw young girls at age 9, they were fully menstruating. And at age 10, they already had their first child. These days, when people hear things like this, they are surprised. But it was a common thing at that time and in that part of the world. As Shafi'i said, rahimahullah, by age 21, you find a girl, she has already become a grandmother. By age 21, she already became a grandmother. In fact, in some reports on the narrations of the Prophet's marriage to Āishah, one of the people before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam proposed to marry Āishah through Khawla, one of the people had come to propose to marry Āishah before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the people in Mecca had sent his parents to propose marriage to Āishah, meaning that it was not something common or restricted to the Prophet alone. It was something that was common. And from amongst the things we also know was the age gap between Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and his father Amr ibn al-As. The age in between them was about 9 years old, between the father and the son. between Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and the father Amr ibn al-As. This is widely reported in the books of history. So at that time, Ash-Shafi'i said he saw girls who at 9 were fully menstruating, and by 10 they already had their first children. So Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi made us understand this early life of our mother, radiyallahu anha, Āishah to bint Siddiq. Al-Imām Adh-Dhahabi continued, فَرَوَتْ عَنْهُ إِلْمَارًا فِيهِ فَرَوَتْ عَنْهُ. So our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha, rawat anhu, she narrated and transmitted from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam ilman kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi. Rawat anhu ilman kathira. Our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha reported a lot of knowledge from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The knowledge was much tayyiban. It was very good and beneficial. Mubarakan. It was full of blessings that she reported from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To make us understand this better, Abū Nāsir al-Ash'ari reported, and Al-Imām At-Tirmidhi collected it in his Sunan, that مَا أَشْكَلَ عَلَيْنَا أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم حديث قط فسألنا عائشة رضي الله عنها إلا وجدنا عندها منه علما. ما أشكل علينا أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم حديث. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari رضي الله عنه said there was no hadith. No hadith. He said, ما أشكل علينا أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم حديث. No hadith became a problem. We did not have issues with understanding a particular report or affirming the meaning of a report or knowing what exactly the Prophet said alayhi salatu wasalam regarding a hadith. Qattu. It never happened. فَسَأَلْنَا عَائِشَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا. And then we'll come to ask Āishah about that hadith. إِلَّا وَجَدْنَا عِنْدَهَا مِنْهُ عِلْمًا. Except that we find out she has knowledge about it. At age 9, she was in the house of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And she was in that house for another 9 years, or about even 10 years before the Prophet died. When she was 18 years and above, the Prophet passed away, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So she lived and learned with the Prophet for 9 years. Adh-Dhahabi said, rahimahullah, فَرَوَتْ عَنْهُ عِلْمًا كَثِيرًا. So she reported a lot of knowledge from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. طَيِّبًا. The knowledge was very good and beneficial. مُبَارَكًا. Full of blessings. And from the blessings from her knowledge was that whenever the people had issues regarding a matter, they came to Āishah radiyallahu anha, as we had read from that report from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. The companions, male, whenever there was an issue, they came to Āishah, and they would find that وَجَدْنَا عِنْدَهَا مِنْهُ عِلْمًا. We'll find that she has some knowledge about it. So it would mean that her marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was just not a marriage. It was a marriage of benefit and blessings for the ummah. Fortunately, Āishah lived for 50 years after the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So for 50 years, what she learned within 9 years. And those 9 years are the 9 formative years of people. Between age 9 and age 18. In our own time, this is the age of late primary school to first or second year in the university. In our own times, between age 9 and 18, this is the age of late primary school, when the individual is already fully aware from age 9, late primary school age, up to first, second year in the university. That was when The Prophet passed away, alayhi salatu wasalam, 9 years after marrying her. And Āishah radiallahu anha learnt a lot from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Imām Adh-Dhahabi said it was ilman kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi. It was a lot of knowledge, tayyiban, beneficial and good, mubarakan fihi, full of blessings from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It means that when people marry learned people, they should seek to benefit from their knowledge. We shall come back to it when we begin to mention the list of the names of the students of Āishah. Imām Adh-Dhahabi did that in this book, Siyar A'alām An-Nubala. He mentioned the name of the students, those who took knowledge from Āishah. You will see who they became in the subsequent generation. As for Āishah, her own knowledge was direct from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and she reports a lot of knowledge from him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa an abiha. Imām Adh-Dhahabi said she also reported knowledge from her father Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, both before marriage and after marriage, because Āishah radiallahu anha was born into Islam. We shall come back to that. When she was born, her daddy and her mommy, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Ruman, they were already Muslims. So she received tarbiyah from the most righteous human being after the prophets of Allah. And she became married to the messenger of Allah. So she's a very, very fortunate person, radiallahu anha. She also took knowledge from Umar. So Imām Adh-Dhahabi said, وَعَنْ عُمَرَ وَفَاطِمَةَ وَسَعْدٍ وحمزة ابن عمرو الأسلمي وجدامة بنت وهب. These were the names of those from whom Āishah learnt. She learnt from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. وعن أبيها. She also took knowledge from her father Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. وعن عمر رضي الله عنه. Āishah radiallahu anha also conveyed knowledge from Umar. In fact, Al-Imam Ahmad in his Musnad mentioned that hadith that our mother radiallahu anha Āishah transmitted from Umar when she was quoting that knowledge from Umar. That Umar said radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr Sayyiduna wa khayruna wa ahabbuna ila Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The person who reported this statement from Umar was who? Āishah. The knowledge Āishah reported from Umar was Umar's statement that Abu Bakr Sayyiduna, Abu Bakr is our leader, wa khayruna, the best of us, wa ahabbuna ila Rasulillah alayhi salatu wasalam, and the most beloved amongst us to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Āishah radiallahu anha also reported knowledge from Fatima. Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, was also from amongst the teachers of Āishah radiallahu anha, and narrations from Fatima occur in Sahih al-Bukhari mu'allaqan. Likewise, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. We recall that one of those people who came very early into Islam was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Our mother Āishah also reported from her. Likewise, Hamza ibn Amri al-Aslami. Hamza ibn Amri al-Aslami. Our mother Āishah radiallahu anha also reported knowledge from her, and that hadith occurs in Sahih from him. And that hadith occurs in Sahih al-Bukhari. It was an incident regarding Hamza himself, Ibn Amr al-Aslami, and our mother Āishah radiallahu anha reported from him. Likewise, from those that Āishah took knowledge from was Judama bint Wahb. Judama bint Wahb al-Asadiyya. Judama bint Wahb al-Asadiyya. We remember her. She was the sister of Ukasha ibn Mihsan. We remember Ukasha, the one who, when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that 70,000 people will enter Al-Jannah without account, and he stood up and said he wants to be from amongst them, that the Messenger should beg Allah that he is from them. And the Messenger ﷺ said, yes, you will be from them. He has a sister from his mother. Her name was Judama bint Wahab. She was from amongst the teachers of who? Āishah radiyallahu anha. And Judama was from amongst the Muhajirat. We remember in Surah Al-Mumtahana, when the Muhajirat, how did it say in that verse? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Naam. يا أيها النبي إذا جاءك المؤمنات مهاجرات فامتحنوهن. From among the women who were there on that incident was Judama bintu Wahbin al-Asadiyya. Her husband passed away during the battle of Badr. His name was Anas ibn Qatada. And what was it that Āishah took from her? The issue regarding al-ghila, that a woman can be breastfeeding her child and then she becomes pregnant, that a man can come and have private dealings with his wife even though she may be breastfeeding. I hope that we remember that issue. That was what our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha reported from Judama bintu Wahb. So our mother Āishah radiyallahu anha had a number of teachers. From amongst them was her husband, the Messenger of Allah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa an abiha, and then her father Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, wa an Umar. Then she learnt from Umar, wa Fatima. She also took knowledge from Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa Sa'd. She took knowledge from Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, wa Hamza ibn Amri al-Aslami. That is number 6, from whom Āishah radiyallahu anha took knowledge. Wa Judama bint Wahab. She also took knowledge from Judama bint Wahab radiyallahu anha. The next thing that Imām Adh-Dhahabi mentioned, hafizahullah, were the students of Āishah radiyallahu anha. She mentioned the students of Imām Adh-Dhahabi mentioned the students of Āishah radiyallahu anha. Some of the scholars say they number about 350 clear-cut people who took knowledge from Āishah radiyallahu anha. They are about 350 if you count them one after the other. And this is quite a large number. Some of them were even companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, like Abdullah ibn Zubayr. She was in her house for a long time, benefiting from the ocean of knowledge she had taken from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. From them was also Abdullah ibn Abbas. From them was also Abdullah ibn Umar. The bulk of them reported from our mother radiyallahu anha, Āishah to as-Siddiqah to bintu Siddiq, and many others. I think it will be appropriate, inshallah, if we mention the name of the students of Āishah from our next class. Bi-iznillah. Inshallah, we hope to do that in our next class. Some of these people even included people like Muhammad ibn Sirin. Of course, when we mentioned Ibn Umar, when we mentioned Abdullah ibn Abbas, when we mentioned Abdullah ibn Zubayr, when we mentioned Urwa ibn Zubayr, when we mentioned Al-Hasan al-Basri, these were men who became the great scholars amongst the early Muslims, from amongst those who took knowledge from the companions of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And yet the bulk of them were from the students of Āishah radiyallahu anha. There was Zayd ibn Aslam. Zayd ibn Aslam was mentioned to be from amongst the freed slaves of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Likewise, Zurara ibn Awfa, Zirr ibn Hubaysh, Zazan Abu Umar, Zazan Abu Umar radiyallahu anhum. These were from amongst the students of Āishah radiallahu anha. I think I would really like it that we run through the names of these people. From amongst them was Nu'man ibn Bashir. Nu'man ibn Bashir was from amongst the students of Āishah radiallahu anha, and Amra and Umar. We remember Salama had 2 children when the Prophet married her. Amra and who? And Umar. The 2 of them were from the students of Āishah radiallahu anha. These were some of them. Bi'idhnillah, I hope that we'll come back to a list of the students of Āishah. The points we could take from mentioning her teachers and mentioning her students is that this ummah is known for that. If we describe our past predecessors after knowing about their lineage and the early parts of their lives, if there were important issues to be mentioned regarding that, from the first things to be mentioned are those from whom they take knowledge, those from whom they took knowledge. It is very important. In our own times, we learn from people here and there, people we hardly even know anything about. So if you ask, who taught you this? Say, one ustaz. Who taught you this? One ustaz. Who taught you that? One ustaz. We barely know about our teachers today, but in the past, in this ummah, whenever anybody was talked about, they mentioned those from whom that person took knowledge, and they also mentioned the major from amongst the students of that person. Bi'idhnillah, this is from where we will continue in our next class to mention those who were the students of Āishah radiallahu anha. We all already heard that report from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari when he said radiallahu anhu, ما أشكل علينا أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم حديث قط. No hadith became troublesome to us. فسألنا عائشة رضي الله عنها. Now we came to ask Aisha رضي الله عنها about it. إلا وجدنا عندها منه علما. Except that we found that she has some knowledge regarding that hadith with her. Radiallahu anha. If a person was like that after staying with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 9 years, definitely she was going to have a lot of students, and she actually has a lot of students. Radiallahu anha. There was even Abdullah ibn Yazid that I recall. Abdullah ibn Yazid was Radi'u Āishah. They had Rada'a. They were breastfed by the same foster mother. That Abdullah ibn Yazid was from amongst the students of Āishah radiyallahu anha. Bi'idhnillah, we'll run through the names of the students of Āishah radiyallahu anha, because that also adds up and makes us understand the kind of students that she produced radiyallahu anha. And at that we can stop here so that we can go back to the question and answer session, Abu Abdur-Rahman, if we have.
Assalamu alaikum ya Shaykhana.
Amin wa iyyakum, Abu Abdur-Rahman.
So the first question here says, Assalamu alaikum Shaykhana. May Allah eat your affairs, sir. My question, you mentioned that Khawla bint Hakim was sister of the Prophet's mother. But the Prophet's name is Amina bint Wahab. How is that, Ya Shaykhana?
You would also note that I mentioned Judama. I mentioned them having step sisters and step brothers. So she's the sister of the Prophet's mother from perhaps another mother, from the same mother, from another father. That will make Khawla to be bint Hakim to have come from a different father. I hope that it is clear. It was a very, very common thing at that time. When a woman became either divorced or widowed, she quickly married. And if she married another husband, of course, her two children, they will have different surnames, but her own sisters will still remain the maternal aunts of that. Because when the scholars spoke about khawla, they say, hiya ihda khalati Rasulillah. She is one of the khalat. And khala means the sister of the person's mother. That is the maternal aunt. That was how khawla has been described. So if she's Khawla bint Hakim and the Prophet's mother was Amina bint Wahab, the nearest explanation we have with respect to that is that Khawla was the step sister of the Prophet's mother. I hope that it is clear from another mother. This was a very, very common thing amongst the Arabs at that time. Just like you would even talk about Tufail. Before Ruman gave birth to Āishah, she had given birth to a son called Tufail before Ruman got married to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So if you hear that Āishah radiallahu anha had a brother whose name was Tufail, and he was not a son of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and that's what that will mean is that the sister of Khawla will be the aunt of Tufail and the aunt of who? Āishah. I hope that that is clear. So it was a very, very, very common thing. Even the likes of Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq, it was not usually commonly understood that she has a different mother from Āishah. So like I'll say simply, the easiest explanation we have is that Khawla bint Hakim, being a khala of the Prophet ﷺ, was the stepsister of the Prophet's mother. I hope that that is clear about the Rahman. It was a common practice amongst them at the time.
Naam ya Shaykh. Naam. Another question says, do co-wives have the right to the same number of days being allocated to them by their husband, if some of them have children and others do not? Jazakumullah khair.
The number of days allocated to women, Nauba, it does not have to do with children. Please note this. It has to do with the woman. It has to do with the woman, the wife, not the children. The man has his own time he should spend with his children. The man should have his own time during the daytime before nightfall, from Tulul Fajr to Ghurub Shams, for all the days between work and his children. As for the night time, it is to be distributed amongst the wives. The night time is for the wives, and every wife is a unit. She has an equal share of his night. It is not a function of the number of children that a woman has at all. Some of you women use that to harass the men so that the men can spend more days and become unfair to another woman just because they claim that the other woman has not a child. You are pushing your husband to injustice. You will make him stand up on the day of Qiyamah when a part of him will be falling apart. If you truly love your husband, don't push him into injustice. Allow him to spend the time with the rest of the women just as he spends with you. As for the children, that forms under the responsibility of the man to appropriately create time and allot time for the children as it's appropriate. But that does not have to do at the detriment of a wife. The man's trying to create time for his children should not be at the detriment of another wife. The wife who will like that now will not also like that that is done to her. Most times when women do things like this and push regarding these matters, they push it because it is in their favor. When it is not in their favor, they look for another argument. So it is the man who should stand firm and fair. The man should stand firmly and fairly The time should be divided amongst the women without the consideration for children. The man should create another time to attend to the needs of each of the children for each of the wife as the man deems appropriate. And Allah knows best, Abu Abdurrahman.
If a pregnant woman is able and capable of fasting, and she knows herself that she can, but on visiting the antenatal care, I told her not to fast, not because of any difficulties, what will you advise, please?
She should reject that dirty advice from the antenatal. Most times, these non-Muslims, they hate you. They don't want you to fulfill the religious duties that you have. And Allah will ask you about yourself and your personal ability that you know you can fast. So you should ignore such women and fast as is appropriate. Are they not the same people who will tell you to remove hijab? Are they not the same people who may even prevent you from salat? So why should you trust them about your fasting when you know that what they say contradicts the reality with you? So don't trust them. Set aside what they say and continue to fast if the fast is convenient for you as a woman. But if the pregnant woman, but if the pregnancy will bring discomfort for you together with fasting, then you should make fidya for fidyatun ta'amu miskin. I hope that is clear, Abdurrahman.
Now, another one says a brother wants to marry a second wife who is a Nicorite. Is it allowed for the husband's wife to look at the Nicorite instructed by the husband?
Yes, it is allowed. It is allowed for that to happen. But the husband should be careful. You want to marry a second wife, you are bringing in the first wife at the middle. You are already starting a trouble before a trouble starts. Men should be men enough. You can go about the marriage without completely involving your first wife to this extent. Be careful, oh men. Be careful about it. Be careful. When you involve her, after you marry that woman, she wants you to be feeding her back about that same woman. And when you stop feeding her, giving her feedbacks, that woman will say that you have changed. So manage yourself. Manage your information. You can go about your search for another wife without having to bring in your first wife. So leave your wife as your wife. If you want to take another wife, leave her as a wife. But when you bring her in to the extent that she's the one who helps you to see whether she's beautiful or not, then you're already starting a trouble. We should be men. No man should behave like a woman and then he wants to marry more than one wife. How can you behave like a woman and then you want to marry more than one wife? Be a man. Be yourself. Be yourself. Be discreet about it. Be discreet. Be diligent about it. Yes, you can share information with your first wife about another wife you want to take. But don't bring your first wife in the forefront of it. Because you may not be able to sustain making the second wife independent of the first one after you become married. You're already skewing before you even start the journey. So I would not advise a man to be doing that. Yes, if he does it, it is allowed in terms of allowance. But that may not be the best thing for him to do. The man should think properly and act appropriately. Naam, Abu Abdurrahman.
Naam, Ya Shaykh.
Can we have one more question from you?
Yes, Ya Shaykh. As that it was This question says, as it was said in the class, that it was Khawla that went to inform the fathers of Āishah and Sauda for the permission to marry them. Is it permissible for the husband to be not physically present in the nikah?
You say what?
He said, is it permissible for the husband to be not to present in the nikah?
But that is not what you are picking from this report. Because in both reports, the Prophet ﷺ came. As for the narration regarding Āishah, it says, فَجَاءَهُ فَأَنْكَحَهُ. جَاءَهُ. The Prophet came. Likewise in the case of Sauda. So what you want to bring from it does not occur in it. What you want to bring from it is that, can a man marry a woman while he is absent? Yes. You can have al-wikala or wakala. You can have it in terms of marriage. In fact, that's most common in the north. The man will be absent from the very sitting where the nuptial knot is tied. So you have a wakil who will stand for you. He will speak for you. Maybe your father or your uncle or your brother or your friend. That's your wakil. He's not physically, the husband is not physically present. That is allowed. But it is not the case where you are pointing to. On both sides, in the marriage of Āishah and the marriage of Sauda, the Prophet was invited, and each of them was married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam right in front of the Prophet, not in his absence. The wife of the Prophet who was married in absence, if I remember, was Maymuna when they were in Hijrah to Habasha in Ethiopia. And the Najashi was the one who conducted the marriage. The Prophet was in Mecca and they were in Abyssinia at that time. So it's a lawful thing. The man may not be present, but in this case, in the marriage of Āishah and in the marriage of Sauda, the Prophet ﷺ was invited and the marriage was conducted directly to him. I hope that it is clear, Abu Abdur-Rahman.
Naam ya Shaykhana.
Can we call it a day today, inshallah, from here? We'll
yes,
come back to the students of Āishah in the next class. If you ask what are we doing in the next class, we want to talk about the students of our mother Āishah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.